Russia's oil has been a target for Ukraine ever since the country gained the ability to conduct strikes on Russian territory. But over the last couple of months, Ukraine has gone into overdrive. Strike after strike devastates Russian oil refining, and Ukraine's enemy is really starting to feel the squeeze of lowered production. And Ukraine just made things a whole lot worse for Russia. Vladimir Putin's week from hell is complete as Ukraine's relentless strikes break Russia's back. Putin's terrible week started on September 18th, which is when the Kyiv Independent reported that Ukraine had launched a pair of attacks, targeting two more of Russia's oil refineries. We'll cover the second attack, which took place in Volgograd, soon. First, it's the strike on Bashkortostan that has done some serious damage to Russia's refining capacity. Ukraine's target was the Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat refinery. The Kyiv Independent calls this facility one of Russia's largest oil refining and petrochemical plants, and Ukraine had to plan carefully to pull off its strike. The refinery is about 1,300 kilometers, or around 800 miles, from the current front line of the war, meaning Ukraine only had a limited number of drones capable of making the journey unscathed. We don't know which drones Ukraine chose for the task, but we do know that they hit their target. The Kyiv Independent says that its anonymous source inside the Security Service of Ukraine, or SBU, reports that Ukraine's drones managed to strike an ELOU AVT-4 crude oil processing unit, which sits at the center of the Neftekhim Salavat facility. That processing unit alone will be an important target. The less crude oil Russia's plants can process, the fewer refined oil products such as gasoline and diesel they can produce. However, the SBU source says that the strike prompted what they dub a massive explosion that consumed even more of the refinery. We don't have much more information than that about Ukraine's initial strike outside of a short video shared by the Xelenova Plus Telegram channel. Lasting only 8 seconds, the video shows a massive fire and smoke streaming into the sky, which is believed to be the aftermath of Ukraine's strike. Who is saying that nothing is on fire? It's only gaining momentum, the channel says before confirming that the footage it shares comes from the Salavat refinery. The Moscow Times says that Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat is Russia's 10th largest oil refinery, and that it has an annual capacity of 10 million metric tons. It's also responsible for producing over 150 chemical and petroleum products, making it among Russia's most diverse refineries, along with it being one of its largest. This strike stung Russia. However, you might have caught a little hint in something that we just said. We told you that the Xelenova Plus Telegram channel shared footage of the aftermath of Ukraine's initial strike of the Salavat refinery. Initial is the word to look out for here because Ukraine wasn't satisfied with hitting this refinery once. About a week after the first strike, it attacked the Salavat refinery again. Both Euromaidan Press and Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty, or RFE-RL, reported on this strike on September 24th. According to the former, Ukraine again targeted a company that generates about $3.6 billion in revenue annually, with a strike that once again targeted a primary oil processing unit. The first time, it was ELOU AVT-4 that Ukraine destroyed. This second strike reportedly took out ELOU AVT-6. The footage from the incident is remarkably similar to what Xelenova Plus shared a week prior. The Euromaidan Press X account shares 3 videos and a photograph, all of which seem to show the same thing from different angles. Massive plumes of smoke are rising into the sky, indicating that it's more than just buildings that are burning. Ukraine must have ignited oil and caused explosions to create smoke clouds that are so massive. The attack took place on the night of September 23rd and into September 24th, Euromaidan Press says. Ukraine double-dipped with its drones. Now the Salavat plant is burning. RFE-RL provides a few more details, noting that Ukraine also attempted strikes on refineries in Samara and Bryansk on the same night as the second Salavat attack. However, it offers no further details, meaning that either those strikes weren't successful or news hasn't broken about the outcomes yet. This time, one of RFE-RL's anonymous sources has confirmed that the SBU was once again behind the strike. The outlet adds that diesel, fuel, oil, gasoline, polyethylene, and bitumen are among the 150 products that this particular refinery is known to produce. Russia, of course, hasn't said much about these attacks. It's managed to avoid its usual drone debris excuse. The lack of footage beyond smoke rising into the air may have played a role in that, and there is no direct video of Ukraine's drones in action. However, the Bashkortostan regional governor, Radi Kabirov, has taken to Telegram to confirm that an attack took place. Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat has been subjected to another terrorist drone attack, Kabirov writes. We are assessing the extent of the damage. All emergency services are on site, and we are taking measures to extinguish the fire. Perhaps that's why there are no claims of debris causing the fires. Those flames are so massive that nobody would buy the excuse, so Russia is pivoting in its usual messaging by appearing to confirm the success of Ukraine's long-range drones, while painting the strike as terroristic. That's rich considering the sheer scale of Russia's long-range drone and missile strikes, which predominantly target Ukraine's cities rather than legitimate military targets. Ukraine won't care how Russia frames it. What it will care about is that the second Salavat strike completes Putin's week from hell as yet more of Russia's refineries burn. But hold on for a moment. During our initial reporting of these strikes, we also told you that Ukraine had hit the Volgograd region. That means Salavat wasn't alone in being a target for Ukraine during the past week. It may be the hardest hit of targets, but Ukraine had others in mind that have caused Putin's week from hell to take a plunge into a deeper circle. The Kyiv Independent reported on this strike on September 18th, noting that the plant Ukraine struck is another major player when it comes to Russia's oil refining. The refinery is the largest producer of petroleum products in Russia's southern federal district, suggesting that it may be one of the plants that's most directly supplying fuel to Russia's troops on the front lines. The Volgograd refinery is capable of processing 15.7 million metric tons of oil annually, which amounts to about 5.6% of Russia's total refining capacity. Ukraine didn't have to send its drones quite as far to hit Volgograd as they did to strike the Salavat plant, just 450 kilometers or 300 miles this time around. Still, the attack appears to have been effective, though the Kyiv Independent notes that it wasn't able to independently verify the information that its SBU source provided. What we do know is that Russia, as with Salavat, is barely acknowledging what happened at the Volgograd plant. The country's Ministry of Defense was instead more intent on claiming that every drone Ukraine sent into Russia on September 18th was shot down. That amounts to 43 drones, the Kyiv Independent reports, though the absence of Bashkortostan from the list the ministry provides is telling. Maybe Ukraine hit Volgograd's refinery, and maybe it didn't, but it certainly hit the Bashkortostan refinery twice. Putin's week from hell was complete. However, the reality is that it's been more like a month and a half from hell for Russia's leader when it comes to his country's oil refineries. What we see here is a continuation of a Ukrainian strategy that sees it launch sustained and repeated aerial assaults, often against the same refinery in quick succession. It's a strategy that has seen Ukraine target close to half of Russia's refineries, as Euromaidan Press points out in a September 24th report. It claims Ukraine has hit 16 of Russia's 38 refineries since the beginning of August, disrupting over 1 million barrels of oil processing capacity per day in the process. The campaign has led to gasoline shortages, as we'll cover later in the video. By the way, if you'd like to learn more about how Ukraine's refinery strikes since August differ from those it conducted in the past, we have a video covering the differences. Ukraine has upgraded its strategy, and you can learn more by checking out that video. And these types of attacks aren't going to stop anytime soon. The Financial Times reports that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has confirmed that Ukraine is both increasing its long-range drone production and is going to intensify its attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure. It's all part of bringing the war that Putin started back home. Once the number of drones matches the Russians, they will feel the fuel shortage and loss, Zelensky said. We already see this increasingly. More drones are reaching targets. That's what will really worry Putin as he licks his wounds following a terrible week. It's not just that Ukraine is launching long-range drones at Russia. That will be an annoyance, assuming Russia's air defenses were destroying all of those drones in the sky. Putin's problem is that Ukraine's drones are breaking through with increasing regularity. It's not just the occasional refinery strike that is stinging Russia. Ukraine's concerted campaign is working, and it seems like Russia's refineries have no way of defending themselves against the onslaught. If that wasn't enough, it's not just Ukraine's strikes that are putting pressure on Russian oil. The West is following up with sanctions and reduced purchases. US President Donald Trump is trying to lead the charge in that respect. When he spoke before the United Nations General Assembly on September 23rd, Trump said that it was about time that the European Union or EU banned all purchases of Russian oil and gas by its members. They have to immediately cease all energy purchases from Russia, Trump said. Otherwise, we're all wasting a lot of time. Trump added that he was ready to discuss how to help the EU execute this sort of plan and that he would be speaking with the leaders of several European nations about it. This call for the EU to cease its Russian gas and oil purchases wasn't new. Trump has said it several times before and has been placing increasing pressure on the EU to do something about it. And the US president has a point. Though steps are being taken to reduce the EU's purchases, it's still one of Russia's biggest fossil fuel customers. The Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air made that clear in February in an article in which it noted that the EU's purchases from Russia outweighed the amount of aid it had provided to Ukraine in 2024. Those purchases totaled 21.6 billion euros, or about $25.3 billion, compared to 18.7 billion euros, or approximately $21.9 billion in financial aid. The EU appears to be heeding Trump's call. On September 17th, almost a week before Trump's UN address, the Kyiv Independent reported that the EU is now looking into ways to phase out its Russian oil imports quicker than it had outlined in its original plans. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen made the announcement on X shortly after speaking with Trump about the matter. Russia's war economy, sustained by revenues from fossil fuels, is financing the bloodshed in Ukraine, von der Leyen wrote. To put an end to it, the Commission will propose speeding up the phase-out of Russian fossil imports. No other details were provided, beyond von der Leyen's claims that the oil cut-off is going to happen faster. Still, it adds up to more pressure placed on Putin. Speaking of pressure, Trump has also claimed that he's going to use his considerable influence to lean on Hungary in an effort to convince the country to stop buying Russian oil. Hungary is an interesting case. The country, though it's part of the EU, has maintained fairly close ties with Russia despite Putin's invasion. It's also clearly heard Trump's calls for the EU to wean itself off Russian oil, and on September 23rd, it delivered a resounding no as its answer. That no came from Hungary's Foreign Minister, Péter Szijjártó, who spoke to reporters about Trump's UN General Assembly comments from the sidelines. "We can't ensure the safe supply of energy products for our country without Russian oil or gas," Szijjártó said, though he also added that he understood the approach Trump is taking. "For us, energy supplies are a purely physical question," he said. "It can be nice to dream about buying oil and gas from somewhere besides Russia, but we can only buy from where we have infrastructure." Reporting Democracy opposed that viewpoint in a September 24th article, claiming that it's more of a lack of will and addiction to Russian money rather than infrastructural barriers that stand in Hungary's way. Right now, it says Hungary receives 90% of its oil via Russia's Druzhba pipeline, which is another part of Russia's oil infrastructure that Ukraine has been targeting in recent weeks. Interfax highlights how much of Russia's fossil fuels Hungary buys. In 2024, Hungary purchased 4.8 million tons of oil and 8.6 billion cubic meters, or BCM, of gas from Russia. It's also bought 1 million tons of oil and 1.2 BCM of gas during the first 3 months of 2025, suggesting its purchases will remain stable. The EU may have its work cut out for it if it wants to convince Hungary to stop buying. However, Trump says that he's willing to help. On September 23rd, UNN reported that Trump is considering speaking to Hungarian President Viktor Orbán about the whole affair. "Well, he's my friend. I haven't talked to him, but I have a feeling that if I did, he might stop, and I think he will," Trump said. There's clearly an implication here, though to what we don't know. Perhaps Trump thinks that the US can offer an alternative to Russia's oil, which would bring Hungary back on side. Or Trump will simply place pressure on Orbán another way, perhaps threatening tariffs or something similar if Orbán doesn't comply. Still, even with Hungary on side, Trump is pushing Europe to apply more pressure to Russia's oil industry. If that increased pressure coincides with Ukraine's more frequent drone strikes against refineries, Russia will be in serious trouble. Or more accurately, Russia will be in even more trouble than it already is. The country's back is already breaking thanks to Ukraine's refinery strikes, with the latest week from hell only adding to Russia's problems. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest that Russia is really starting to feel the impact of what Ukraine is doing. Take diesel as an example. On September 24th, the Kyiv Independent reported that Russia's diesel exports have hit a 5-year low. It all comes down to the refinery strikes and the reduction of Russia's refining capacity by more than 1 million barrels per day that we mentioned earlier. Thanks to that reduction, Russia is being forced to make the difficult choice between selling diesel to raise funds for Putin's war or ensuring that Russia's people and military have the diesel they need. It appears that Russia is making the latter choice if declining diesel sales are anything to go by. The Financial Times provides more details, stating, "The strikes have disrupted more than 1 million barrels a day of Russia's refining capacity, according to Energy Aspects, a research group. Diesel exports, if they maintain the current rate, will fall to the lowest monthly total in September since 2020, according to both OilX and Vortexa, which track cargoes." It also notes that one of Russia's biggest diesel customers, Turkey, is already turning to other nations for its supply. India and Saudi Arabia are now selling more to Turkey. Putin won't want to see that. A lapsed customer may never come back, especially if they know they can get a more reliable supply from another country. Compounding the diesel issues are gasoline shortages. Reuters offered an interesting take on these shortages in a September 23rd article, in which it claimed that Russia's existing fuel crisis is rising. It points out that Russia has a surplus of diesel, which it can rely upon to serve domestic needs for a while, even if it has to cut down on exports. However, the country's gasoline production matches domestic demand, meaning there is no surplus. And that matching assumes that Russia's refineries are operating the way they're supposed to operate. When those refineries are going up in flames, gasoline supply becomes a problem. Several Russian territories are already experiencing shortages, causing queues to form at gas stations. Often those in the queues discover there is none of the AI-92 or AI-95 gasoline their vehicles need available. Russia also seems to be favoring state-owned fuel stations over privately owned stations now this gasoline shortage is underway. Independent stations account for 40% of Russia's gasoline retail network, with Euromaidan Press stating that it's these types of stations that have lost access to reserves, leading to them dealing with disruptions and higher borrowing costs. Timing is also a factor in Ukraine's attempts to break Russia's back, as Euromaidan Press adds. Is the timing of the strikes coincidental or calculated? Perhaps both. Global oil markets face a significant oversupply, naturally depressing prices, just as Russia needs maximum revenue for military spending. Ukrainian planners are pursuing a dual strategy, hitting both refineries that produce domestic fuel and export terminals that generate revenue, the outlet says. It's a brilliant approach by Ukraine, and Euromaidan Press's statement also hints that Ukraine's refinery strikes are having a wider impact than they may first appear to have. It's not just Russia that is being hurt by these strikes. Turkey is now turning to other suppliers, as we noted earlier. Plus, as News Sky reports, the Russian refinery strikes are prompting reviews of oil prices all around the world. The outlet says there is now an increased demand for oil futures among traders, and that Russia runs the risk of running a deficit of between 10% and 15% by the end of 2025. Ukraine is impacting global energy markets with its strikes. With any luck, that global impact will lead to even more pressure being placed on Putin. After all, unhappy customers, such as Turkey, will take their business elsewhere if Russia isn't able to provide the one thing that allows it to maintain ties with nations that otherwise condemn its actions in Ukraine. Losing that oil business means a decline in revenue, which in turn weakens Russia's military. The decline is already happening, Euromaidan Press says. Russia's oil revenue for 2025 so far is down 37% on 2024's revenue figures. Plus, Brent crude was trading at $67.87 per barrel on September 24th, which is almost $2 less than what Russia needs it to trade at to maintain its federal budget. Economic shockwaves are already being felt inside Russia. Add frustration about gasoline and diesel shortages, plus the constant refinery explosions that bring Putin's war back to Russia, and you get yet more pressure. There's only so much of this pressure that Russia can take. Eventually, its back will break. And while all of this is happening inside Russia, Putin is still trying to play games with NATO. That isn't working out too well for Russia's president. Putin tried to break NATO, and now Russia is falling apart. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of Ukraine's latest Russian oil refinery strikes. And thank you for watching.